All right, so the main spackling is done. All of the trim has been caulked in, and then we've also done all of the wood puttying on any of the holes and stuff that we saw in the trim. I did want to mention that you can spend as much or as little time prepping your walls as you would like. It's kind of a personal preference. Josh and I are professional painters, so we're taking this up to our standard. It also depends on the quality of the walls. If the room hasn't been touched, it hasn't been painted in years like this room, there's probably going to be more things wrong with it. There's going to be more deficiencies in the wall. There's going to be more, nail pops and cracks and all that good stuff. So, if the walls are in really good shape, you might not have to do as much spackling. So just be aware that you could spend, a day doing prep, or you could spend several days. It just depends on, where your walls, where their start point is, and what you're expecting the job to look like when you're done. So this is a pretty good example of a decent amount of prep, I would say. Short of skim coating after removing wallpaper, this is a decent amount of spackling. All right, so we're pretty much ready to sand, and before I get into showing you guys how to do that, I wanted to mention that I have done a little bit more prep in here. So one thing that I've done, I've pulled out all of the drop cloths. The reason for that is when we sand, we're gonna have quite a bit of dust settling on the floor. And because there's carpet in here, we can easily vacuum that up off of the carpet. And over the years, we've found that to just be easier than leaving the drops in, getting a bunch of dust on our drop cloths, and then having to go shake them out, because however much you shake them out, it's still gonna be tracking dust everywhere. We have found that if you're okay with it, we just let the dust settle onto the floor, and then we vacuum it all up once we're done sanding. Also, when you go to vacuum, we're using a shop vac. I think I mentioned this before. Just make sure you have a bag in your shop vac and that it's set up to actually take on dust. If you don't have a bag in there, what it'll do is just blow the dust out of the exhaust, and it'll just make more of a mess in the room. I have also done one other thing. On the inside of these closets, I've tarped off all of the interior of the closet with plastic. So there's the plastic sheeting that we use to cover the furniture in the middle of the room. I have tarped off all of the clothes because we're not emptying out these closets. We're not going to paint the interior of these, but what I don't want is any of the dust particles that are going to be floating around here to settle on the clothes that are in here. A lot of times you don't even need to use tape or anything. You can just kind of tuck the plastic behind clothes, and a lot of times if it's on the top shelf, I find that if you just put a shoe up there, it tends to hold pretty good. All right, so now we're to the part where we are going to sand, which is everyone's favorite part of the painting process. It's not. I like using our standard 150 grit sandpaper from 3M. We showed you guys how we take a full sheet, rip it in half, and then fold it into thirds. There are a lot of other sanding methods. You can use sanding discs, you can use sponges. It's really a matter of preference, but this is actually how I sand our job sites, and I find that just using sandpaper, I can really get a feel for how the wall is gonna look and the texture, so I can get the spackle spots to look how I wanna look when I'm sanding just by, as I sand, I kind of keep my fingers on the outside. I trail the sandpaper so that I can kind of feel where all the ridges are and things like that. I'm gonna show you guys how I do it, but when I'm actually gonna do sand the room, I will be wearing a respirator, which I would highly recommend. You don't wanna be breathing in this spackle dust, and particularly if you're doing overhead sanding like we're about to do, the particulate's just gonna be in the air everywhere, so you really can't avoid it. So I would recommend wearing a respirator. You don't wanna suck any of the stuff into your lungs. Yeah, I'll start at this window here, and we're just gonna kind of do this middle section. So you're going to want to start on the edges, and what I want to do is work the sandpaper around the feathered edge, the outside perimeter of the spackle spot, and then I'm just going to sand down those feathered areas. And pretty much I'm just using a back and forth motion. But once you have the perimeter areas edged or sanded off, what you want to do is kind of knock down the mound in the middle, the main body of the spackle, because you want the spackle spots to be as flush with the wall as you can. And that's kind of the whole point of spackling, is you're trying to smooth out and have a uniform wall when you're done. Got a spackle spot right here that I'm going to sand, and you can kind of see the difference between the one I've already sanded and the one that I have not. So this is, you can see the feathered edge right here. That just needs to be knocked down. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this. Just gonna kind of run my hand over it to see if there's any spots that I need to knock down a little bit more. And pretty good. I'm gonna take down a little bit in the middle. All right, so you can tell now that that is much, see how like smooth that is? These edges have been sanded off and it looks like this. So, and then you can see right next to it, this is a spot that hasn't been sanded. You can still see like the rough edge on this. And this is like, there's the mound in the middle that just needs to be knocked down. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that everywhere. And that way you want something that looks like this to then look like this. All right, so that you can kind of see now that we have this middle section all sanded out. And once you get going, it does go by pretty quickly, kind of once you get a feel for it. It won't take you as long as I've kind of explained things here. For now, I'm going to pull this camera out of here because I'm going to make a lot of dust. I'm going to put on my respirator and I'm going to be sanding down everything in here. So, and just a little recap on sanding. The harder you press on the sandpaper or whatever sanding element you're using, the more material, like the more spackle you're gonna take off the walls. As you go, you're gonna wear down these sides of your sandpaper, and that's why you kind of keep rotating and flip to the newest side. Because if you find yourself sanding way too much, it's probably because your sandpaper has been worn down, and it's time to switch pieces of paper. I did this whole room, and Josh and I, between the two of us, probably used like a sheet and a half of sandpaper, so they do go a long way, but just don't, you know, if you wear it down to nothing, just make sure you're switching out your sandpaper. That tends to make things a little bit easier for you.
Amazing.